Opening weekend has come to a close, and I want to check in and give some tips and suggestions that I found useful, how I found it to be overall, and I'm going to go over how I crafted my self-chill weapons, the ones with the temple mod, and you can do it on any caster base for pretty cheap with Recombinators. First off, how'd it go? Honestly, Ghost of the Deep made it probably the most enjoyable opening campaign ever, like outside of Twink gear. 30% attack speed, 30% movement speed, and the increased damage just made everything insanely smooth. Once I got brine bound for the third ascendancy, literally everything was frozen all the time, and honestly it was pretty surreal. So to show you what that was like, here's the Maven boss invitations that I recorded when I was progressing through maps. In literally all of them, the bosses just stood there and took it until they died. I don't think any of them got more than one attack off in any of the invitations. Perma-freeze is one of the more broken things I can remember playing from a progression standpoint. I was also on some pretty scuffed gear into red maps when I needed to improve survivability because I couldn't get instant freeze with Power Siphon because of the projectile duration, so making sure I had a reasonable suppression required that I rework gear a bit earlier than I'm used to, but after that it was pretty smooth through the first two Void Stones, and around a level 89 or 90 I swapped into Exsanguinate when Power Siphon started to stall a bit on single target, and I've been absolutely ripping after that. Surfcaster Ascendancy is insanely fun. I'm about to hit 95, and I set up self-chill with a bench trigger mod around level 90 while I was upgrading my town to get Recombinators, and then for a few divines I made a proper self-chill weapon with a temple mod, and I'll show you how at the end of this video. But first, a few quick tips that help make things smoother. The first is that I allocated Winter's Embrace almost as soon as I could right out of campaign, and it felt amazing doing map progression. It helped freeze rares, and I only just now at like level 93 or 94 dropped it to move some passive points lower in the tree. The Cold Mastery for 5% increased damage taken per second of freeze is also a crazy amount of additional damage with Brine Bound, which guarantees a minimum of 1 second of freeze. I don't think I recommended it highly enough in the original guide. Once you get a bit more damage, you won't need it. Currently I'm freezing everything without it, but it was really nice all the way through late reds. The second tip is make sure you get endurance charges. I ran T15s and 16s for a while without them because I wasn't being hit frequently enough with all the freeze happening and the base charge duration of 10 seconds. So I would go very long stretches without being hit, which meant Enduring Composure never procced and I wouldn't have endurance charges. So to fix that, I grabbed a Restless Ward, which gives a ton of endurance charge duration, and the problem was solved. I went from a 10-second charge duration to 26 seconds. It's also a pretty good starter chest. It has okay-ish evasion and energy shield. I mean, it's not a tanky chest by any means. It gives you some movement speed per frenzy charge and some life regen per endurance charge, which helps make self-chill really, really comfy. I need to craft a more tanky necrotic armor before I start spinning around Ubers, and I'm probably going to do that in the next day or two. But in the kit that I have, I've done a ton of Maven carries, I've done a ton of Shaper carries, I've done an Uber Shaper, though it wasn't particularly fast, I've done a T17, and I've done all the invitations. Now I'm probably like a day behind where I'm used to being on League Start, but it's mostly because of the Atlas. I don't know, I think my RNG was just really bad. It took me forever to get out of yellows. Maybe the idol system will grow on me as I get better idols, but for now I'm kind of missing the Atlas for progression. Either way, let's look at the Recombinator Craft, since that's probably what most of you are here for. Alright, so the first thing you need are any caster base of your choice. Rune daggers, wands, scepters, whatever you prefer. Also, and before I go further, a lot of the optimal way to recombinate items depends on the market price for things. This is one way to make these weapons. It's not the only way. But where things are at, given the current state of the market, this is what I think is best and most cost efficient. Now you're going to need two things. The first is 4 or 5 trigger weapons and 4 or 5 +1 all spell gems on the base you want to make this with. I used rune daggers this time instead of wands because they were easier to source for 5 to 10 chaos. The supply of these is somewhat small. If you want to self-farm the weapons, you can run temples with Toxic Grove. They're pretty common drops. Now for +1 all gems, these are pretty abundant on trade. If you're SSF, you want to find bases at or below level 82 and use a Shuddering, Metallic, and Corroded fossil to self-craft them. This is also pretty straightforward. Craft of Exile can show you how. I'm not going to get into that, but getting the fossils might take some time to farm. Once you have these weapons, you're going to want to isolate the modifiers in the prefix pool, meaning they need to be the only prefix on the weapons. So on one, you're going to have +1 all gems, and on the other, you're going to have the trigger mod. Nothing else, no bench mods, just these two mods. There are two ways to go about this. The first is to use an Orb of Annulment. Now this risks the mod that you want to keep, and given the scarcity of it, I think the second option is a little better, which is a Split Beast, the Phenomenal Plagued Arachnid. Now this will give you 2 copies, and there is a good chance that you will get the mod isolated, but is more importantly guaranteed not to delete it. Now if it fails and you end up with 2 prefixes on the split base, you can YOLO annul at that point. The split piece also has a side benefit of removing suffixes, which will be important later. Okay, the next step is just jam them together. So you have a 1/3 shot of getting both of those prefixes together on the final base. And even if you fail, you get to keep one of the mods. Now, once we have our base with an open prefix and both of the prefixes that we want, +1 all gems and the trigger mod, we need to set up the suffixes. So we need 2 suffixes. It doesn't matter what they are, at least for this sort of level of the craft, and an open suffix. Now, if you have filled suffixes, then you're gonna have to YOLO annul, and you have a 60% chance of success. But there's kind of not another way to solve this without spending a lot more currency. If you have only 1 suffix, what you're gonna do is bench any prefix, so like say increased mana, and then Exile slam a second suffix. The goal is to have 2 naturally rolled suffixes and then a benched suffix of cannot roll attack. And the last step is to add remove harvest physical, which will give us a guaranteed +1 physical gems. Now you have to risk the prefixes to do this, which is why you want to fill the suffixes before you do so to improve your odds of success. Given the relatively low cost of making the base, I think this is optimal. There is another method where you can clean all of the suffixes and benched multi-mod, prefixes cannot change, and cannot roll attack, and you can guarantee a safe +1 physical gems, but the cost of the prefixes would have to be quite a lot higher in order to justify spending that 7 divines. And I don't think it's worth it versus just 1 divine of cannot roll attack and then gambling. Now, usually what happens is if you're uncomfortable with a gamble, somebody else has already done so and you can buy something pre-crafted on the market. So definitely check and see what these cost before deciding if you want to do it for yourself. But that's basically it, right? This is the weapon I'm using right now. And if you wanted to take it a step further, you could prefixes cannot change and then use a veiled orb. There are a lot of really good veiled suffixes like crit multi, double damage when focused. And then bench the last mod that you want. You could do something like mind throwing speed is a good choice. I personally am using double damage when focused because of the way freeze works. With 2 weapons equipped, I get 30% double damage when I hit focused. This is for single target only, but that varies my damage, which gives me larger freezes periodically at the cost of a slightly higher baseline all the time if I were to use like crit multi, for example. All right, that's all I've got. So far, this has been super fun. Hopefully, the economy stays alive long enough for me to try out all of the different build ideas that I want to. I'm going to link my profile in the description if you're curious what my current build looks like. It's always public, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.